Alright everyone, welcome along, Training Tuesday. So to understand a little bit more about the data that we've got and how we need to wrap it around and put a governance layer around it and manage our entities within our business so that our reporting is always great and excellent and we get the most out of all our data and the best insights we can, we need to think about one more item, okay? It's something that will affect you all, okay? And I'll almost guarantee you won't have thought about it unless it's been pointed out to you in the past, okay? And that point is granularity. So let's go on over and have a look at granularity and see if we can figure out what that means for us in the context of our data analytics environment around English food hygiene. Alright, so granularity is about levels of detail, right? Just how detailed are we? How far down do we need to go? How far up do we need to go? Okay, so if we have a look at some of the sample data from our food hygiene, right? This is something I've just been working on, take you through some of the stuff we've done to build it up. Okay, but essentially what we've got is we've got a few bits of information. We've got things like the postcode, which is where the restaurant actually is, so the postcode of it. And those of you who live in England will know, postcodes makes sense, right? It's like quite a small area, like, you know, a couple of 100, 300, 400 people or so at most in a postcode area kind of thing, right? So that's quite a narrow little area that we know, so that's good, okay? Narrows it down. The problem is that's difficult, and if we remember and we had a look at the LSOA data, right, it was just really, there was too many of them, like 33,000 or so across England. It's just too difficult, right? That's not going to be easy to work through. There's no nice names to it. I mean, E1, right? You're not finding it, okay? That's the low level. There is this middle level, okay, which we might be able to do a little bit more with. And then around that as well, we've got wards, which is more for like elections and things like that. So potentially that gives us a different area. But as you can imagine, these are all aggregating up. So this is where the granularity comes to. Where we started on the other side of it was around the local authority name that we had. So here we can see this, the LA name. That might be the top level that we'd be prepared to go to. Beyond there, obviously, you've got region and you've got country, you know, England. But I think, you know, we'd all say, hey, if we went top level, England, food hygiene, we're not going to help us, it's not going to help us with our analysis. Likewise, if we look at some of the LSOA maps, it's just difficult because you can't plot it on a map. You have to use a shape map. And shape maps, because they don't have landmarks or other items on it, they make it complicated for people to really understand what area they're referring to. So we kind of need to find that middle ground. And this is granularity. This is where granularity comes into it. So what we're likely going to do is use LA name as a nice way to start to get into something, and then we'll use probably the lower level super output area or a ward, and we'll think through and work out which one is going to work better for next week. So what we want to do is to have that next week, bring it all together. Ta-da, here's our new maps. Okay, but we'll need to be thinking through our granularity. There's other types of granularity as well. So, you know, see if you can figure out some commonality with it. So we've got the date granularity. So we've got the days, day of the week, is it year, month, day of month, week, year, quarter, right? Decade, century, all those kind of things, depending on what you want to do, will shape what you're doing. You know, if you're doing a traditional business, they might say, we want monthly reporting, monthly. If you're looking at a retail business, chances are you're going to be asked to do weekly or a variation on a weekly, okay? Because the retail cycle is very much more a weekly driven cycle. Times is a great one, okay? So we've talked a lot about having a calendar dimension, right? Where you've got your dates in a calendar. Right? We've never really talked that much about times. Now, times are going to be important. If you're a shop, for example, you're going to want to know, oh, when are our peak sales times, when are our minimum sales times? So you're going to have that granularity from the point of sale, but you're then also going to need to have that granularity for analytics, and you need to understand the two. So you might have, these are the sales to this minute. Is minute okay? Do you need to go to a second? Does that going to impact it? Remembering storage things, there's all sorts of other things to get into. But times is one where you really need to think about what you're doing and round your times that you're bringing through in your analytics to an appropriate level. And then you can use that to present up, this is our analytics. For example, for a retail store, I might at most care about in 15-minute chunks at most, right? I'm probably cope with it in an hour. What are the ebbs and flows? You kind of got to balance it with everything else, but there's lots there. Products as well, you're going to find there's a granularity with products. So you're going to have your product dimension, and then it's also going to have all sorts of support things to help with adding or removing granularity. So you've got aggregation going in. So there's a lot that goes on with it. Yeah? So if you have a look at the practical side of the food hygiene stuff and see just how that works. Alright, so here we are, okay? This is me, one of me data core workflows, okay? Or data flows. So if you remember, one of the things I've said is build up some core data flows that are going to be used and reused across your analytical environment. And there's a clue there, okay? Because what you'll typically find is granularity will relate to a dimension, and it's all part of being able to support your aggregation structure of what it is you're looking to do. So it will invariably be your dimensions that are there, but you may find that your facts are what are going to steer your dimensions. So for us, we started with postcode because that's part of our fact. That's the granularity of our fact table. Okay? But what we needed to do was to get to an LA name, so local authority name, to then be able to really easily plot that onto a map. So what I can do is I can use a shape map with the LA IDs, for example, to plot that and go, ta-da! Here it is. Okay? And that makes a great set of visuals. And then we can use, and this will be the bit we'll probably have to experiment with and just look at time to load, like load times for it, as to just how far down we can go in terms of that next stage for that visualizations on tooltip visuals. So we'll cover that, as I say, tomorrow, next week. Okay, so how have I done all this? Now in the real world, and I'll be honest with you, given that this is something that at most we would do once a year, we would update and refresh this once a year, I would likely set all this up in Excel and just do it in Excel, and then use index matches to join everything. But I thought, well, index match is all well and good, isn't it? But did you know you can do index match effectively, right, within Power Query? Oh, he says. Can you? Yes, you can. So what we've got here is something effectively is doing the match part of index match. Okay? So if we have a look at the formula for it, what you can see is list.positionOf. Okay? So you can treat a column as a list, right? And effectively that's what it is, behind the scenes, under the covers, however you want to put it. Okay? So what we've said is go and get me the position in this LA lookup table. Okay, and if we bring the source of that through here, right, this, okay, bring that through, look up in there, and I've just imported it through, you can see it's here, but it's just pulled that spreadsheet through. And find where it matches the LSOA code here, right, so when the two codes match, return that whole number. Okay, and that's really all that goes on. So it is just like the match part of index match. And then we've got here LA lookup, LSOA index. Okay, so we can see, right, we can do that, and we're referencing the other column. So what do you reckon then? Okay, granularity is always present whenever you're doing analytics, right? You're going to have your dates, your months, your years, your weeks, your quarters, whatever you're going to do, right? And you're going to need to be able to work through and understand how you're going to aggregate your data source up to it. If you think a lot of the data sources that you get through now, from especially system generated, there'll be date times. Right? Date times are rubbish when you're looking at where you need the daily sales figures. It's where you can do it, but the storage of it is terrible because you can't compress the column. So you need to balance aggregation and granularity effectively and understand the impact that it will have on your model for the better and for the worse. Okay? So it's a tough subject, this one, but it's one that you have to really get your head around and understand. You have to be going, right, we're going to store this, we're going to get the data through in this level. We're going to convert it as we bring it through the ETL steps to this level, which is the most efficient to store. So date time is what comes in. We're going to convert it to date only because we care about daily sales as our lowest reporting granularity, to then be able to say, right, we've got daily, weekly, monthly. Do we need to have, is there a 445 or a 544 or a 454 retail calendar aspect to it? Do we have a fiscal year period that we've got to then adjust the traditional month period to? Do we have other things? All of that has to be understood by you as you're building up your dimensions. And that's really what I was saying. You have to be aware at all times, what am I doing with the data as it's coming through? Knowing as well that if we choose, for example, to strip out all the time information, that's going to impact if somebody says, right, I need to understand what the most effective time or our peak sales volume time was on our store in Oxford Circus. Okay? Peak time? We don't have it. We've got days. You need to think through. So if you think that's going to come, you're doing a retail store or a retail environment, by all means put in a time dimension. But you're doing it because you've considered it, you've thought about it, you've understood it. But bring through the minimum you need. Right? It is easy to add additional data if you follow these videos, you follow the steps, you understand the principles of governance and management and how we start to say, right, we're going to add this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Adding is simple. Okay? Removing is a nightmare. Okay? So do not put the time dimension in if you're not going to need it. Because if you just put it in, is it going to be right? And when somebody asks the question of needing it, are you going to have it the right way, or have you maybe made assumptions that are going to just be shot out the water as soon as you start? If you haven't got the requirement, you haven't had the request, don't bring it through. We need to know the peak sales times. This is what we're going to do. But you would 9 times out of 10 be aware, because it's like you'll start to hear that, when we release new stuff, when's the peak, what's happening with this? Are the shift patterns become a factor? As soon as you start hearing key things like that, you think, we're going to need time to understand what's going on, how many stores, how many, it becomes a real headache. Be aware though, at all times, to keep it to the minimum that you can bring through. And that's not me being like, do you want to bring stuff through? That's a case of saying, keep it simple, and it's easier to add than it is to remove. Because if you've got that time in and you don't need it anymore, nightmare. Anyway, hope you have a great week. Right? Keep with it, right? And I hope you're still practicing away. Stay safe. Have a great week. Ta-da.